Hello, in today's webinar, I'm going to be talking about the Xero and Quickbooks integration for a rent-to-rent or a self-managing landlord setup. So using the direct rent transaction type as a way to receive rents from the tenant. As always, all the information that's covered in this webinar is private and copyright of R2R Online. So the agenda for today is I'm going to be going over the basics of how to schedule a sync, and syncing a tenancy with Xero and Quickbooks. Going to be going through individually each system, how to reconcile rent the standard way if a tenant overpays their rent or underpays the rent, and part payments as well. Also going to be talking about how to undo the reconciliation process on both Xero and Quickbooks. I'm going to be talking about how to handle contractor expenses and how to recharge that bill to the tenant itself. Going to be covering both systems individually, the first half being focused on Xero, the second half being focused on Quickbooks. Just going to move over to the demo section of the webinar. To find the integration screen with Xero on Arthur, you just want to head to Financials here on the left-hand side. And we have the Financial Add-on section here at the top. You just want to click Go to Xero Screen, and this is going to bring you to the summative screen that we have, which shows everything to do with the link between Arthur and Xero. First thing we're going to be looking at is the main synchronize page. This is the place that you will be performing a system-wide sync. So to synchronize all data on both Arthur and Xero, you're just going to want to press this button here to synchronize. We also have the function on this page to select different types of the financial system to synchronize. So let's say you are just reconciling rent invoices for the day and you just want to bring back the payments and not have to wait for all the data to be synced. You can just go to mode, select payment, and then synchronize. And that's only going to synchronize payment transactions between the two systems. This is a good way of saving time, especially if you are only working on one aspect of the system whilst on our site. Second thing I'm going to be talking about is how to schedule a sync. So we have the second page here, which is synchronize history. This is going to show you all the syncs that have taken place on the system, the start, the end, the date in which they occurred. And it's also going to allow you to view the individual sync logs. If you click view log, it's going to bring you to the sync log page, which shows you every single action which has occurred during a sync. This is very helpful for identifying any sort of problems or issues that you think might have occurred during a sync. All you have to do is come and view log and just click status warning or status error. And that's going to show you any warning or error messages which appeared during the sync. And you're going to be able to identify any problems that might have occurred. At the top right here, we have this configuration box. Once you click that, it's going to bring you to the sync schedule configuration screen. This will allow you to schedule an automatic sync at any frequency on any day which you choose. Currently, I had it every other day, but I'm going to change that to every day at 6 a.m. You can enter any time of day and any frequency of days that you want to run an automatic sync. And then to save that, you just want to click Update Configuration. And now at 6 a.m. every day, an automatic sync is going to occur between Xero and Arthur. So I don't need to manually sync across the new transactions which are made. Final thing we're going to be looking at is how to sync within the actual tenancy screen itself. To get to this screen, you want to go to Tenancies here on the left-hand side. Click within the tenancy number, and that's going to bring you to the tenant summary screen. You want to head to statement to look at everything financial. Statement is going to show all the transactions related to a specific tenancy on the tenant rent statement. And to sync this tenancy specifically with Xero, we're just going to want to head to more and then synchronize this tenancy with Xero. What that's going to do is bring us to this screen here where we can just synchronize this individual tenancy with Xero. So if you're just working on one tenant on a day and you just want to bring back their payments or sync over some new transactions you've added, you can sync just this individual tenancy here. Next part I'm going to be going over, I'm going to be heading over to my Xero account where we're going to be talking about how to reconcile the different types of rent you might receive as a self-managing landlord or in a rent-to-rent scheme. To get to the reconciliation screen, you're just going to want to go to Dashboard. Within the bank account that's related to, you're going to want to click Reconcile 64 items, and this is going to bring you straight to the reconciliation screen. Just a breakdown of how the screen works in terms of functionality. On the left-hand side, we have the bank statement lines. These lines represent an individual transaction either in or out of a bank account. You can have this either a live bank feed with your bank account, or you can import the statements manually. On the right-hand side, we have all the different functions which we can use to match transactions and reconcile them with these statement lines. So we have match, create, transfer, and discuss. Match will allow you to find and match transactions which already exist on the Xero software. Create allows you to create a new transaction brand new in this screen just to reconcile off. Transfer allows you to reconcile this as a transfer from one bank account to another. And discuss allows you to leave notes to either other employees, staff, or a bookkeeper which runs your Xero for you. What I'm going to do is scroll down to find the bank statement lines which relate to my specific tenancy. As I can see, the first transaction relating to my tenant was in the 1st of January 2020. The first invoice here was a direct rent invoice for £500 on the 1st of January 2020. And if I head to the reconciliation screen, we can see that we've received £500 from this tenant on the 1st of January. And the Xero algorithm has matched this up with that Arthur transaction, which is synced through from Arthur, based on the date, the reference, and the amount. So to reconcile that off, all we're going to want to do here is just press OK. And what that has done has linked that invoice transaction on Arthur with that statement line and created a receipt transaction, which will be synced through when we perform a sync. Second transaction we're going to be looking at is this 250 1st of February rental transaction. Now, if I go to my tenant statement on Arthur here, we can see that the invoice for the 1st of February was actually £500. So it seems that we've only received half the rent this month. To deal with this, we're just going to want to go to find a match. I'm going to search my tenant reference. And I'm going to select the rental invoice to do with this current period. Now, to reconcile this, we're going to want to split this invoice. And as you can see, Xero has already calculated that a part payment of £250 is going to be needed to reconcile against this statement line. And a remaining amount of £250 is going to sit still outstanding on the tenant rent statement. So I'm going to want to click split. And as you can see, we're now able to reconcile this amount against that statement line. Just want to click reconcile. As you can see, that's now reconciled that statement line off, and £250 is still going to be left outstanding on that particular rental transaction. Next thing we're going to look at is this 1st of March transaction for £576. If I head to Arthur, I can see on the tenant statement, I have a rental invoice for the 1st of March for £500, and I can also see I've got a £76 disbursement charge for a broken mirror. So it seems that this tenant has paid both for that rental period and the 76 amount for the broken mirror. What I'm going to want to do here is click Find a Match. I'm going to search my tenant's name. And I'm going to find that broken shower invoice and that £500 rental invoice. And as you can see, by ticking them both, I'm now able to reconcile them both against that one statement line. Last thing we're going to be looking at here is an overpayment of rent. So if I go for my tenant statement, my 1st of April direct rent charge was £500. But if we look here on Xero, we've received £503 from this tenant on this particular day for that period. To deal with this, we're going to want to click Find a Match. I'm going to search my tenant name here in the reference box. And I'm going to want to find this 1st of April invoice here. Now notice we can't reconcile this 500 amount because this total is still out by £3. To deal with this, what we're going to do is add a new transaction. We're going to click Receive Money. This has been received as an overpayment, so we're going to switch that round and we're going to add a reference in as well. By clicking Save Transaction, you can see that an overpayment of £3 has now been added into our selected transactions. And we can now reconcile both these transactions with that received £503 amount in the bank statement. So when I click Reconcile, that's all been dealt with for us there. Now to undo any sort of reconciliation in Xero, what it's important to establish is there's two different functions on Xero for unreconciling. If I head to Account Transactions here on the right, I'm going to pull up all the related transactions for this tenant. Now we can see here, we've got all the different transactions that I just reconciled, the full rental amount, the part payment, the two invoices, and the overpayment. If I click within one of these transactions, we can see that we'll have the option to unreconcile. Now we don't want to do this because essentially what that's going to do is remove the link between the statement line and the transaction, which is good. However, when you reconcile a transaction, a payment receipt, is created. If you just unreconcile, what's going to happen is that payment transaction is still going to remain on Xero. So if you keep using the unreconcile function, you're going to develop a lot of duplicate payments and receipts that will build up on the system and imbalance your data. So it's important to use the remove and redo function. What that allows you to do is remove the link between the statement line and what we reconciled it with, but also delete the payment that we created by doing this. So by clicking remove and redo, it sets us back as if we didn't reconcile anything. A key thing to go over when it terms of reconciliation is how to perform a rental refund or any sort of tenant refund. So as you can see on the 15th of March, we refunded that tenant £87. To reflect this within Arthur, what we're going to want to do is create a negative charge transaction. You do this by just going to the same statement page here, add transaction, selecting direct rent, and entering a negative amount here in the net figure here at the bottom. We've already done that. We've got minus £87 transaction for the 15th of March. And when we sync through to Xero, essentially what that is going to do is create a credit note. To view this credit note, we're going to want to go to Contacts, All Contacts, search my tenant's reference, and as you can see, we've got a sales credit note approved transaction here. Now notice that even though the transaction is in the Xero system, it's not appearing here on the bank reconciliation screen. That's because we still need to add refund to this credit note. So if I click view, that's going to bring us to the credit note page where we're now allowed to make a cash refund transaction. We're going to want to select the date. That refund was made on the 15th of March. It was paid from my Aston Chase client account. And I'm going to want to add a quick reference. I'll call it TV refund. And once I add that refund, we can see that a cash refund has now been paid, £87 to my tenant, Sadio Mane. And if I head to the bank reconciliation screen, we can now see that that £87 cash refund transaction has now appeared on the reconciliation screen to be matched with this spent transaction in our bank account. And to reconcile that, just going to want to click OK. Final thing we're going to want to go over is how to handle contractor expenses and recharging them to the tenant. So let's say in this scenario, the broken mirror was paid for by the tenant, but me, myself, the self-managing landlord, I needed to pay the contractor the £76 amount for the broken mirror, and I billed the tenant after the fact. So we've already shown how I created the charge. I billed the charge, to the tenant when he paid his rent and £76 for the broken mirror up front altogether. Now, to create the transaction, both for the tenant and for the contractor, we're going to want to add a transaction called disbursement charge recharge. Essentially, the recharge element is used for transactions which we're billing to a tenant, but we're also having to pay for the contractor. To add the contractor side of the transaction, we're going to want to click Create Additional Contract Transaction for Contractor. Here I'm able to select the related contractor, add a description, a date, and an amount. Notice we also have the box here for the amount that's going to be charged to the tenant. So when creating this disbursement earlier, I added 76 in this amount here and 76 in this column here. So creating two transactions, one for the contractor and one for the tenant. Once you click save, a disbursement charge is going to be created, which is going to sit on the tenant statement, but there's also going to be a contractor bill, which is added to the contractor statement. Now, to get there, we just want to go to contacts, contractors here at the top, and the contractor which I added this bill to is right here. Going to want to click the I logo and then statement on the right hand side. This is going to bring me to the contractor statement. And as you can see, on the 1st of April, we now have a contractor bill for a broken mirror for £76. Once we sync with Xero, that's going to come over and appear for us on the reconciliation screen. So earlier, I reconciled the 76 charge to the tenant along with his rent, but this is required to be reconciled as well, because I also need to account for the fact that I paid a contractor on the 1st of April £76 for the work he did on my property. And this transaction here, which is on the statement, is what we're going to be reconciling this against. So you can see we synced it through, and the £76 charge for the contractor has appeared here on the right hand side as a contractor bill. To reconcile this off, all we're going to want to do is just press OK. Now we're going to be going over the QuickBooks side of the demo. Now, just as we went to the Xero screen, very similar to get to the QuickBooks Online screen, you just want to head to Financials and go to QuickBooks Online screen. This is the summative page, which is going to show you everything to do with the relationship between Arthur and QuickBooks, all the different classifications of mapping, and the synchronized screens as well. To perform a system-wide sync with QuickBooks, you're just going to want to head to Synchronize here on the right-hand side and start Synchronize. That's going to sync all the data between Arthur and QuickBooks, vice versa on both systems. To select a mode or a specific transaction type that you want to sync between the two systems, you're going to want to go to Mode and select the aspect of financials that you want to specify as the sync on. Very similar to Xero in the way that you can sync any part of the system with QuickBooks individually if you'd want to save time. To do that, just go to Modes, select, and then start Synchronize. To schedule an automatic sync with QuickBooks, you're just going to want to head to Synchronize History, go to Configuration, and that's going to bring you to the Sync Schedule configuration screen. Now, right now, as you can see, I've got an 8:30 sync running automatically every single day. If I want to update my frequency, all I have to do is tick or untick these boxes and just click Update Configuration. Also on the screen, you'll see we have a record of every single transaction sync, that has occurred on this system. You can see the start and the end, and we're also able to view the logs as well. Very handy for spotting any problems or errors that might have occurred during the sync. You're going to see a line-by-line breakdown of every single activity which happened. And if you want to view the warning errors, just click these boxes up here. Final way to sync between QuickBooks and Arthur is just by doing it within the tenancy. If you go to Tenancies, click within the tenancy number, you're going to be able to sync anything on this statement or any tenant details using More and then synchronize this tenancy with QuickBooks. This will allow you to sync all the data just related to this tenancy from Arthur to QuickBooks and vice versa. To do that, just going to want to click Start Synchronize. Going to head into QuickBooks now to run through this side of the QuickBooks demo in terms of reconciliation. To get to the reconciliation screen on QuickBooks, you're just going to want to head to Banking here on the left-hand side and click within the bank account that you're going to be doing the reconciliation in. I'm going to be reconciling within my client account here, so I'm going to select that on the right-hand side. As you can see, the first statement line on my bank account here is a 1st of January rent invoice for £500. If I go onto my tenancy statement on Arthur, I can see that the direct rent invoice for that period was £500 and it was invoiced on the 1st of January. To reconcile this, I'm just going to want to click the statement line. And as you can see, QuickBooks has assumed that this 1st of January £500 invoice for my tenant, Virgil van Dijk, is the correct invoice to reconcile with. So to do that, I'm just going to click Match. That's going to move from the For Review section into the Reviewed section. As you can see, we've got that 1st of January rent there that has been moved now from For Reviewed to Reviewed. Second thing we're going to be looking at is this 1st of February transaction on my bank statement for £250. If I go to my tenant rent statement on Arthur, I can see that on the 1st of February, there was a direct rent invoice of £500. So it seems that this tenant hasn't paid the full amount this month and has only paid half. To match this in QuickBooks, we're going to want to click this statement line, click Find a Match, which is going to bring us to the Find a Match screen here. I'm going to want to find the invoice. There it is, 1st of February invoice for £500, and just tick this box here. What that's going to assume here is that £250 of this is going to be a payment transaction, which will be created when we just click save. So as you can see, the transaction's been matched. And again, that's been moved from the for review section into the reviewed section. Third thing we're going to be looking at is a combined transaction of 576. If I go onto my tenant rent statement, I can see that on the 1st of March, we have a direct rent invoice for £500 and also an invoice for £76 for a broken shower. Similar to the Xero demo, in which we've created a disbursement for this tenant and also the contractor, but the tenant has paid for both the rent and the disbursement in the same payment. To deal with that in QuickBooks, we're just going to want to click within the statement line, click find a match. And as you can see, the system has already assumed that the £76 rental invoice for the 1st of March, and the 1st of March rental invoice, just going to want to tick those two. And as you can see, the total is 576. And to match those transactions, we're just going to want to click save. Final thing we're going to be looking at in terms of rent is this £503 received transaction on the 1st of April 2020. If I look on my tenant rent statement, I can see that the rental invoice for this period was £500. So it looks like my tenant has overpaid by £3. To deal with this in QuickBooks, we're just going to want to click within the statement line, click find a match, and find the related invoice. So this 1st of April £500 rent invoice is the correct one. So I'm going to tick that. And I'm going to want to click this resolve button here. By clicking this, what we see has happened is a £3 resolving transaction. A payment of £3 has been added on here. You're just going to want to make sure you select a VAT code for this. I'm going to pick not applicable 0% on sales. And when I click save, that will now allow the transaction to be matched against that £500 rental invoice in Arthur. And we've also got that £3 overpayment, which will sit within QuickBooks, and we can allocate it to later rent charges which come through. Final thing that I'm going to be discussing in relation to the QuickBooks integration and reconciliation is how to handle contract expenses and recharging to the tenant within QuickBooks. Similar to Xero, as we discussed, in terms of setting up a disbursement charge for both the tenant and the contractor. So as you can see, on the 1st of March, I created a disbursement for the broken shower, £76, which we reconciled just then alongside a rental invoice as well. To add transaction for both the contractor and the tenant, you just want to come to add transaction, select disbursement charge recharge, tick create additional transaction for contractor, and we're going to want to select a contractor, add a description, add a date, and an amount for the contractor. I did this earlier, so I inputted an amount of £76 in the contractor charge section here and £76 in the tenant section here. And by selecting save transaction, what that's going to do is create a £76 contractor transaction, which will sit as a bill on the contractor statement, and also a £76 disbursement, which is going to be charged to the tenant for the work that the contractor did on that broken shower. I already did this earlier. So if I go to contacts, contractors, click the I logo next to my contractor, and then click statements. What I'm going to see here is that 1st of March disbursement charge for a broken shower, which I created alongside the tenant transaction. And when we sync with QuickBooks, what we're going to find is the money that we paid out to the contractor on the 1st of March 2020 for £76. We're going to be able to match that 1st of March £76 contractor bill with this transaction in QuickBooks. To do that, just want to click in the statement line, and it's already found it here. The correct record has been found. Bill, broken shower, 1st of March 2020 for £76 for the bolts and cuts contractor. To match that, just going to want to click match. Finally, to undo reconciliation that you've done within QuickBooks, very simple. All you want to do is go to reviewed, and this run of transactions here that we've just reconciled, we're going to want to just click undo. And what that's going to do is undo the reconciliation, and the transaction that's created will be deleted, just like we hadn't done any matching from the start. So I'm just going to unmatch all the transactions that we just matched for this tenancy. And as you can see, if I go to the for review section, we've now got all the transactions back, like we didn't reconcile them at all. Thank you for attending this webinar. I hope you enjoyed me going over the Xero and QuickBooks integration for rent-to-rent and self-managing landlords. Just to recap, I went over reconciling rent the standard way. I went over overpayments, part payments, and underpayments. Also talked about how to undo reconciliation on both Xero and QuickBooks, and how to handle the contractor expenses and recharging that expense to the tenant on the tenant rent statement. We also went over the syncing basics for both systems, talking about the system-wide sync, setting up an automatic sync, and syncing just within the tenancy itself. So I hope you enjoyed this webinar. Thank you very much.